Wishbone Ash and bands that I've worked with, have always been 2 guitars. So I worked on the harmonies of Phantom of the Opera. We went to a rehearsal, played it, and they said, brilliant, great, we'll go for it. But at the same time, they were looking for a drummer. I brought down a good friend of mine, Johnny Richardson, who suffers a little bit from his ears, so he didn't last very long because the rehearsals were quite loud. Clive Burr, me and Clive had known one another for many years before Maiden. I bumped into him at a pub at the East End, and I just said to him that I was joining the band and they were looking for a drummer. So I took him along to the rehearsal, they liked Clive, and then the rest is history, you know, that's what we started working on.
By the end of the decade, they had finally formed as a credible and commercial band. And in early 1980, they got down to the arduous business of recording their first album, Iron Maiden, with Will Malone in the producer's chair. In February 1980, while the band were out promoting their album on the Metal for Mothers tour, EMI released their first single, Running Free. Despite receiving almost no radio airplay whatsoever, it totally exceeded record company expectations, leaping into the charts at number 34.
We were told that the album, when it was released for advanced orders on EMI, we were told it would probably go in top 10, hopefully top 5. It went straight in at number 4, I think, and I remember walking around Manchester Square where EMI's office is, and they were all hanging out the windows, all shouting because they knew that we were coming to the record company. And it was just amazing because that was when I sort of really realised the fact that the following they had in this country, they built it up, as I said earlier, by doing the groundwork and by attracting audiences from little clubs all over the north of England, Scotland, anywhere you want to go. They'd built up that fan, hysteria, so that when the album was going to come out, everyone had it on advanced orders. And the magic of getting an album in the charts is that if you can get as many advanced orders as you can, it's all sold on that 1 week. So it just went straight in, and we just couldn't believe it. It was unbelievable. It was a growing up stage. I think it was that day when the album went into number 4. I can't remember what we were doing. We was either on tour or we was rehearsing or we were doing something. It just meant that the band just suddenly looked at one another and thought, you know, we're up there now with the big boys. So now we've got to be recognised and we've got to keep it up there. And that's the day we sort of grew up and went, right, we're not a little band anymore, you know. And everyone was over the moon. At that time, everything seemed to take off, and it just went absolutely potty. You know, you weren't at home. It was just a case of you never knew where you were going to be the next day. And when we went on tour and it came out, and they were cutting short the tour because there was another tour coming up that was more important. So really, it was one of those things that your feet never touched the ground.
With Running Free entering the top 40, Iron Maiden were invited to perform on Top of the Pops.
Iron Maiden's first Top of the Pops performance is great as well because Running Free it went into the top 40, but it didn't come in that high in comparison with their latter material. But they got on Top of the Pops somehow, and they turned up and just assumed that everyone played live. And of course, in those days, that wasn't the case. And I don't know the full story of how it went down, but they turned up and said, right, we want to play completely live, and Top of the Pops were like, oh, no, you can't do that. But I know for a fact that Paul Di'Anno has told me that, I don't know if they insisted or he insisted, but certainly there was some sort of like collective might that said, no, we're Iron Maiden and we're going to play live, and they did. But as Paul will tell you, you know, it was a live performance, but in comparison with their live shows in that Top of the Pops studio, they were actually playing very quietly.
And we had loads of trouble in the studio because the Top of the Pops studio is so quiet. I remember we were on the same night as Shakin' Stevens, and Shakin' Stevens was doing This Old House, and he was on the next stage, and he was dancing, and the squeak from his trainers was louder than the track that was being played. And we sort of looked at him and thought, if we can only hear the squeaking of the trainers while he's dancing, what are we going to be like? So what we had to do was dampen all the kit down and the amps. We had them on sort of number half and distortion, and we just tried to get, but we did it sounded great because we did it in the end live. But it was like doing your first gig at the local pub. It's always been an ambition, and it's always been, you know, your little dream. You go, we're on top of the pops, you know what I mean? So that was like, because we were still very young and naive a little bit, it was fun.
We're up there on stage, we don't know what the hell's going on, you know, like, we're saying, well, we're only going to play live, we won't mind, we won't do nothing like that. We've all gone up there, all like, leathered up and like, in West Ham scarves and everything, and then you can feel the hate coming from the audience. These kids all want to just go, oh yeah, like dancing around. They get mowed down like idiots by the cameras on wheels. You know, they get shunted around like cattle. And we're looking over the other stage after us, ready to play Spandau Ballet. And they're all like looking at us, and we're like, you tossers, like, fuck off, you know, like you make up poncy wankers. Like, I was like, they was really nice guys in the end, to be honest with you. But it was an experience, but not one really wanting to repeat.
The band considered Running Free and Remember Tomorrow to be two of their strongest recordings.
Well, the one I'm probably the most of is Remember Tomorrow, because I wrote it for my grandfather, because that was one of his sayings, always like, things look bad now, remember tomorrow it'll be better, you know, so that's always stuck with me. I've kept by that. That's a good little creed to go by. Running Free, it's just like youthful rebellion. Unfortunately, I've not been able to drop that. Even still, I'm still the same sort of person. Just have it, you know. Like you might be dead tomorrow. Go for your life, you know. Like it's one of the things, and it's quite ironic. I've done that like just 16 with a pickup truck, out of money, out of luck, and then started doing the thing about LA, and then 10 years later, I'm in jail out there in nightmare. So it's like, it does come true. Don't do it, kids. It's not good.
I think Remember Tomorrow was always a nice melodic song. I'm not into too much madness in songs. Phantom of the Opera was always one of my favourites. But it's like anything, it's like Running Free. When we started working on that, they said, this is going to be the single. So it was like, you know, when you're working on the song and you've got the chorus coming up, I changed the end slightly because it was a single. You know that it has to be slightly a bit more catchy, you know, a bit more sort of like commercial.
In the spring of 1980, the group began working with producer Tony Platt, then known for his work with AC/DC.
The whole thing was quite an interesting exercise because this third-party song, if you like, Women in Uniform, had been introduced as a result, I guess, of discussions between the record company, the publishers, who were Zomba, and the management, Rod Smallwood. And this was a song that was originally done by an Australian band called Skyhooks. And it's, you know, it's a pretty good song. And you know, Iron Maiden are very much the product of some extremely skillful marketing and management. And this was really a very good attempt to get something that would get reasonable radio play and at least get the name known, you know, even if it wasn't necessarily what they would consider to be ultimately the most credible music for their particular audience. So there were certain stresses, I think, that would be a good way of putting it, when we went in to do these three songs. Obviously, the other two, Invasion and Phantom, were very much, you know, hardcore Maiden songs. But this particular track, Women in Uniform, was considerably slower, and it required a vocal that was not in the same key as the rest of the instrumentation. It really needed something that sailed above a little bit. So I guess it was